My name is Paul Fernandes. I'm a class of 1967 graduate. I grew up on Long Island, so I arrived at Cortland in September of 1963, completed my degree in physical education in 4 years, so I graduated in June of 1967.
Great. Tell us why you chose Cortland for your undergraduate degree.
If you grew up on Long Island in the 60s like I did, there were a lot of Cortland people who were involved in physical education and athletics on Long Island. And what would happen is someone from the admissions office would work their way through Long Island area, and I was in Nassau County. And when they heard that you were interested in possibly physical education and teaching, it was almost like, well, then you have to go to Cortland, because Cortland's the only place to be. So I really never thought about going anywhere else other than that. Someone visited early in my senior year, heard I was interested in physical education, said, would you be interested in Cortland? And I said, absolutely. And from there on, I just went through the application process, was accepted, and that was the only place I applied and the only place I went to go to school.
And back then, you didn't come to visit the campus before you made your selection?
Yes, what you did is, at that time, for physical education majors, you had to come beforehand and take a skills test. So you got a chance to come on campus and spend a couple of days on campus, but they put you through a battery of skills tests to see whether you were fit to be a physical education major. And that was kind of an eye-opening experience because they took you from the swimming pool to the basketball court to just doing some agility tests. And you really found out what being a physical education person was going to be like. So that was the indoctrination into it. You had to pass the skills test in order to be able to apply as a physical education major. So I did that, and that was my visit to Cortland. There happened to be 2 students who were from my high school who were here. I stayed in dormitories with them. It was almost like what we're doing now, and I thought it was an official visit. And that was my official visit for physical education.
That's great. Can you identify any Cortland professors or staff members that had the greatest influence on you and try to give us reasons for that?
Yes. Bob Wallace is one, having been my baseball coach for 3 years. There was always something special about him, and I think sometimes you have to leave before you really understand what that special quality is. The thing that was best about Bob was that he not only cared about you as a baseball player, but he cared about you as a person, and he cared about all aspects of your life. And he was the one who would make it a point to continue to stay in touch with you when you first graduated. And I've never forgotten that. And because of that, we've become friends, and we've stayed that way. He and his wife Sally came to our wedding. So that's the kind of relationship that we developed with him and with his wife. So he certainly was one person that was extremely instrumental. Another person is Al Stockholm. He was the basketball coach in my junior year. Barney Williams had been the basketball coach in my sophomore year. Barney Williams went on sabbatical, and Al Stockholm took over. And he was an influence. He was just a great coach to me, someone that you really enjoyed playing for. And some of the qualities and values that he taught you were the things that you were able to bring with you when you graduated and try to instill that into the kind of a teacher and the kind of coach that you were going to be. So those were 2 of the people when I was here who had the most influence on me.
Well, that's a good lead-in to my next question is, how prepared did you feel you were when you took your first job? You know, did Cortland do a good job at getting you ready for the real world?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the thing that impressed me the most is I wasn't sure whether I was prepared or not when I left, but my first job was working as an assistant, with an assistantship at CW Post out on Long Island. And there were 3 or 4 other people who had assistantships at the same time that I did. And we all taught classes together. And once I started to teach, and I saw the preparation that I had, and how much further along I was, and further prepared than they were, that's when it started to sink in that the experience that I had had at Cortland and the preparation that they had given me was better than what other people had been able to receive. And that's when I knew that when I was here, I really got a great education.
Good. Were there any lifelong lessons that you learned while you were here that you feel you've carried on as a professional in your own life?
As I mentioned, the thing that impressed me the most with Bob Wallace was the fact that he cared about us as people. He cared about our families, who cared about all of the things that were happening to us. I think that's something that I tried to bring with me from the time that I first started to coach, was to not just look at the people who played for you as being athletes who were on the team, but as being people, young people who were getting an education, to care about what happened to them academically, as well as what happened to them athletically. And also to kind of learn more about them as people, so that you could find out whether they were having any problems at home, or whether there was anything that was part of their personal life that they might want to share with you, because they needed someone to be able to be their mentor, and to kind of wrap that whole thing up of being their teacher, being their coach, being their friend, and at the same time letting them know that you care enough about them that they could always come to you with the problems they may have, and that you're there to assist them and hopefully be able to get things better.
Right. If I asked you what your fondest memories of Cortland were when you were here, do you have any idea what you'd respond to that question?
Fondest memory athletically probably was in our senior year. We wound up winning the SUNY Conference Championship in baseball. And it was funny because we were just there last night with Bob. We went to Green Arch for dinner, and he's been there probably 50 years. But at the time, that was off limits, and you couldn't go there. But because we found out after we had played that day, later on, that we had won the championship. I can't remember whether somebody else had to lose with us winning, but we found out early in the evening, and we all knew that's where he would be. So we wound up going there, knowing that we weren't allowed in. But because of the fact that we had won the championship that day, he talked to the owner, who allowed us to come in so that we were able to socialize a little bit with him and some of the other staff people that were there. It was kind of a big thing because we went where we weren't allowed, and we were allowed in, plus we were celebrating something that was important to us, and he was our coach, so it was important that we could share that moment with him, and we had the opportunity to do that.
Great story. I just have a separate question I'd like to ask you. You're co-founder of the New York State Baseball Coaches Association. Now, how did that come about?
What had happened was, and this is way back probably in the 70s, the baseball coach at New York Tech, which was right next door to where C.W. Post was a good friend. And then an assistant coach at St. John's University was also a good friend. And we had always been trying to organize college baseballs that would have a little bit more exposure in the New York City area, which was difficult because New York City is such a professional town. And people kept saying, it'll never happen, you can never make it work. Fortunately, what did happen was that I was introduced to the director of community relations for the New York Yankees. And I told him what we were trying to do. And he was nice enough to talk to George Steinbrenner, and was able to get the Yankees to allow us to have our meetings at Yankee Stadium in the press room in the off-season, when the Yankees were basically shut down because of not being baseball season. And when we first tried to do it, we had a meeting at New York Tech, and we had about 5 people show up. And then as soon as we started to have the meetings in the press room at Yankee Stadium, we started getting 25 or 30 coaches who would wind up showing up. So that's how we were able to get that particular organization started. And then what we did after that is we had an all-star game between all Division I players on one team and Division II and III players in New York State. And the coaches would recommend the players that they wanted to play in that game, and then we would play a game at Yankee Stadium just before the baseball draft, so that some of those players who might not have been seen by professional baseball scouts would have the opportunity to get that exposure. And we wound up doing that. So we had college players from New York State, anywhere from Buffalo all the way down to Long Island, who had the opportunity to come to Yankee Stadium and actually play the game in Yankee Stadium. They played on the same field that the Yankees